Greetings and welcome to a summer edition of Montpelier Connection. I'm State Representative Mike Mrowicki from the Wyndham 4 District of Putney and Dummerston. And we have concluded back in June all our business in the legislature. We had our 18-week session and then we had a veto session. So we are now in the afterglow of that session and even preparing for the next session as we head into campaign season here. We want to talk a little bit about the session that just passed, and our guest today is Representative Emilie Kornheiser.
Hi, Mike. It's really nice to be here with you today.
Well, thank you, and thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule. I know you just concluded your work with the Governor's Institute for the summer, and how did that go?
It was wonderful. So this is my second year as the director of the Governor's Institute for Youth Action and Global Issues. Yeah. I took it over from John Ungelleiter, who I'm sure you know, who was the director for decades and did an incredible job. And it's just, 10 days, 60 kids from all over the state of Vermont talking across difference. Yeah. We really try to focus on how to have difficult conversations, how to sit in difficult conversations, how to talk across difference. Meg Mott, who I believe is one of your constituents, maybe?
She's a Putney person.
Yes, she came and joined us. It was really just like an incredible opportunity to see the kids stretch themselves.
Yeah, and I no doubt that it went well, and the kids had some good help from you. I mean, one of the things that we have learned is that if you don't have those skills in the legislature, you don't get anything done. And nobody gets anything done on their own.
No.
And I think that's a good lesson for these students. Now, these are high school students?
High school students from all over the state.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that work.
Absolutely.
Whatever we can do for our youth is helping our future.
Even sleeping in a dorm room in 90-degree weather, Mike.
Oh, well. So we've just concluded a session, a biennium actually. You know, we call our sessions 2-year biennium, where we squeeze, a year's worth of work into 5 months. But I'm really feeling good about a lot of what we did. Some states are trying to take away women's rights. Some states now, women have less rights than they did 50 years ago, most especially around reproductive rights. And I feel really good about what we did, putting in statute and getting the constitutional amendment passed. We did climate actions, and maybe we can talk a little bit about the Superfund in a little bit, because we are seeing damage around the state now that is just what was predicted, and really a shame at the damage it's causing for Vermonters. We did the Act 250 reform, and one of the things I feel really good about is that we continued to keep the focus on both conservation and housing. And I feel, even though we're in such a housing crunch, this is a huge thing. And especially the next piece I want to mention is somebody who has worked in childcare, who has worked in aftercare. We put together some reforms that are going to allow, and I just heard from a parent yesterday about this. They said, "Oh, you guys did that. It's so helpful for us to help subsidize working parents who need childcare, and then to allow for the workers there to get paid more than they would at a fast food restaurant." Because we've heard of workers that have left the field because they say, "I could make more at a hamburger place." So if we could talk a little bit about that, because I think there's a lot of misinformation about that, because there's a payroll assessment. It's pretty small, but it has a huge impact. So those are a few of the things that I feel really good about. And is some things that you want to talk about that feel good from the last, or the challenges as well?
That, I think, well summarizes a lot of my stack. I think on climate action, the pollinator bill we did to really protect Vermonters from toxic chemicals and to protect our bees and butterflies and hummingbirds and all the other pollinators is something, as I've been knocking on folks' doors over the last few days, last few weeks, months, however long it's been now, is something that really stands out and is I'm walking dirt roads, and so I get to see all of the pollinators that we might have saved with our action. That's incredible. The child care bill, as you said, I knock on someone's door. If it's it's often hard to make the work of government, the very slow work of government, sort of actionable and tangible for people.
Yeah.
And so when I knock on someone's door and their kid, pokes around or peeks around their legs to say hello to me, and that curious, who is this stranger at my door feeling. And I get to say, did you get a child tax credit in your tax return this year? Did your childcare costs go down on July 1st? Like, to see parents' faces light up knowing that the work we did actually makes it easier for them to make it work as a parent is incredible.
Yeah.
And as you said, I know you've worked in childcare. I know your wife's worked in childcare. I've worked in the early childhood system myself, though never patient enough to actually work on the ground with the kids. And the fact that we were able to do something that both lowered costs for families and increases wages for the folks who work in that field is, for me, a really rare win at getting something across the finish line.
Yeah, and this is for the future of Vermont.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's education or childcare, and what I mean is pre-K through 12 education, I know there's some concerns about the costs this year, and we're working on that. We will continue to work on it. Our hope is that the governor works with us, and when he calls meetings, he shows up for them.
Yeah.
But this is the future of Vermont. And when people ask me, why did I vote for that? I said, for our children. This is the future of Vermont. And, to put it a little bit lightly, though, I say the children of today will be taking our blood pressure tomorrow, and they'll be changing our bedpans, too. So do we want the bedpan that has been warmed or the one that comes out of the freezer? And I try and put it lightly, but the reality is these are the people that will be taking care of us. And even beyond that, we want a world-class educational system because kids today are working in international markets. Don't we want them to have the best education? And yes, we want to make it affordable, and we're working on that. But I'm not going to shortchange our kids. I'm not going to shortchange our teachers. I'm not going to scapegoat teachers. We did that, and I'm proud that we're supporting our children that way in our educational system.
Me too. When I talk to employers, business owners, and families all across the district, folks talk about, needing to get to work or needing people to come into work if they own a business, right? And the barriers that they see are childcare and housing.
Yeah.
And those, when I think about what it means to support businesses in our state, those are two big drivers of it.
Yeah.
And when we invest in our kids and make this a place where it's a great place to grow up, through our public schools, through early childhood, or through making sure we have reproductive rights, gender affirming care, all of that makes Vermont the kind of place that people want to live, people want to stay, if we have enough housing for everyone. And I'm proud of the work we did, both in the Act 250 reforms, regulatory to make it easier to build new homes, but also in how we're raising some new revenue from second home purchases in order to build new housing for Vermonters, because we have a shortage, and I think it's really something we need to dig in on.
And I think if we can use tax policy to start to level the playing field, we have a chance to set a tone for the nation, and hopefully the federal government will start to look at these inequities. I have a clip that I've been sharing with people, and I hope maybe we can play it on here.
Oh.
It's from Warren Buffett.
We don't mind paying taxes at Berkshire, and we are paying a 21% federal rate. If we send in a check like we did last year, we send in over $5 billion to the U.S. federal government. And if 800 other companies had done the same thing, no other person in the United States would have had to pay a dime of federal taxes, whether income taxes. No no Social Security taxes, no estate taxes, no, it's open down the line.
And Warren Buffett takes the time at his annual meeting for Berkshire Hathaway to say, we just sent a check for $5 billion to the IRS. He said if the 800 other largest companies in the US paid their taxes like they should, no other person would have to pay a federal tax.
Yeah.
Not an income tax, not a Social Security tax, that's how big these inequities are. And if people would, if these corporations and millionaires would just start paying their taxes, it wouldn't keep falling on us. They pay less, so we pay more. And that's an inequity I think we need to address.
Absolutely. And the tax policy that we were working on this year and that the House was able to get across across and out of the House and over to the Senate in a few different circumstances was exactly those kinds of proposals that Biden has worked on, that Elizabeth Warren has put forward, and that Bernie Sanders put forward, and that a lot of other states around the country are working on. Because we can't have all of the needs of our state sitting on a rapidly shrinking middle class.
No. And the reality is we are in another Gilded Age now. And it's a time of have-nots and have-yachts. And
you have all the funny little quips today,
well,
Mike.
I mean,
I am
this
enjoying
is right
this.
out there.
Yes.
That's what the disparities are now. And I say that because I was reading where the sale of super yachts is booming while we're fighting about dollars for childcare. I think that speaks to how grave the situation is, that these disparities have just gotten so far out of whack. And I think, from my perspective, we can go to Kamala right now because I believe Kamala will address those inequities with tax policies. We will not continue the ruinous policies, the Trump tax policies that created a cohort of millionaires and corporations that pay little or no tax. So they pay little less, we pay more. And I hope people can start to see that. That's why our taxes are higher for working and middle class people.
Absolutely. And speaking of super yachts, last summer, someone from one of the environmental advocacy groups came down to Brattleboro to meet with me. And, I'm happy to talk about environmental issues anytime, and it's work that I'm proud to do for Brattleboro. But they wanted to talk to me about second homes and tax policy related to second homes because of, the environmental damages that are caused by super yachts, private jets, and second homes that folks keep heated when they're vacant, right? Or that traveling to and from, right? And so all of these issues of excess means that the environmental damages are, sitting with us too. And I know you brought up the Make Big Oil Pay campaign. And that's part of this really incredible suite of work that I think we did this year in the legislature and that we're going to continue to do to hold corporations responsible for the damages they do on climate, on chemical poisoning, and on our children, right?
Yeah.
And how we can make sure that they're cleaning up their messes.
Yeah.
Climate change, the incredible devastation. We are so lucky down here.
Yeah.
That devastating damage that's happening in the Northeast Kingdom right now, that happened in central Vermont, and to really help prevent future damages from happening.
And I believe, just like the tobacco companies knew what they were doing, the fentanyl, the oxycodone pharmacy companies, they knew the damage they were creating. And the oil companies knew 40 years ago or more the damage they were creating. And right now it's Vermont taxpayers, it's US taxpayers that are having to cover these costs of rebuilding our roads. In 2021, Putney, my town, got hit with one of these localized storms.
Remember that.
We lost 13 roads and a bridge in one night, $1 million in damage. Eventually, we got some help from FEMA, but we had to put the money up front. Vermont taxpayers should not have to be paying for the damage that's caused by what the fossil fuel companies did. So I believe the Climate Superfund is a good way forward. Now,
I want to sort of go a little deeper on that, because I think it takes a tremendous amount of political will and political courage to hold corporations responsible that way. And our legislature is, on most days, a really like profoundly collaborative, friendly place. I worked very closely since I was elected with Mike Marcotte, a Republican chair of the Commerce Committee. We're, really close colleagues, and all of the Republicans on my committee and progressives and the Democrats, and we all work together. But when we're tackling something like holding corporations responsible, including, like the House put a pretty significant fee on pharmaceutical companies this year in order to pay for opioid-related damages, right? We have the Climate Superfund, we have the PCBs. We don't just need to do that through lawsuits through our AG's office. We can do that with the law. But it takes courage to really grapple with the misinformation that comes from corporations when we are trying to hold them accountable. And I'm glad to be working with you on this, to be able to, sort of face them in the cafeteria, face the misinformation and say, no, like there's another way to do this.
Like the fantasy 70 cents a gallon tax on oil that we keep hearing about.
Yes.
And it's not true.
No.
It's not true, but yet this information keeps being put out there.
I remember last summer when oil prices, and 2 summers ago when oil prices just went through the roof because of, the war in Ukraine, war in the Middle East. And I'd hear from constituents, what can you do about my incredibly high oil prices? And I was like, well, I can't control multinational corporations and their price gouging. I can't control, global war. But what I can do here in Vermont, what we can do here in Vermont, is to do everything we can to help folks transition and to more sort of sustainable, localized sources of heat, and to weatherize homes, because, this housing stock is drafty as heck, Mike, and we need to make sure that Vermonters have the resources they need to button up their homes. So that's the kind of work that I think our legislation does, but we have corporate scare tactics that paint it as, a tax. And I mean, that bill never even came through my committee, so I have proof that it wasn't a tax, or it would have definitely come to us for clearance.
But I think is it the American Petroleum Institute?
Yes.
Spent a bunch of money on this.
They did. They send a good email, those folks.
And I think behind them are the Coke Industries. So the reality is we would all do better for lots of reasons if we moved away from using oil so much. And I share my experience where we put in a heat pump. Before that, we heated exclusively with wood, although over the past few years, I wasn't putting up 5 cords of wood by myself. We were buying wood. And the last time we bought wood, it was $300 a cord. So 5 cords, $1,500 a month. So we put in a heat pump. Our heating costs the first year were $900. It's cleaner, it's cheaper. What's there not to like?
So, I mean, I haven't been able to afford a heat pump for my house yet. And I am very impressed you did that with all those cords of wood. We have an aging state. I imagine most people, it takes a lot to stack all that wood, though I know many folks in their 80s who are still stacking their wood. And so I think it's going to take like a lot of different, like meaningful government interventions to help people make those kinds of transitions. Because for most of us, we don't have the money to put up front, even with like really the incredible federal tax benefits we're seeing right now.
It's a big deal, but there is help out there. And if people are interested, go to Efficiency Vermont, go to Green Mountain Power's website if you want to look at different heating sources. There's significant help out there. So that's the past. As they say, campaigns are about the future. Again, Kamala, thank you. I keep mentioning that because I feel so enthused now, where just a couple of weeks ago it didn't feel very good. And I listened to her speech in Georgia the other day, and I haven't seen this kind of enthusiasm since Obama,
Yeah.
and how articulate she is, how strong she is. It's just very impressive, and I feel that much better, and just wanted to share that enthusiasm.
I'll tell you, I've been, as I've said, knocking on doors for
Yeah.
many hours a day, every day. And so it's pretty much like all that fills my mind when anyone talks to me about anything is what other people have told me lately. And the shift from folks feeling just so hopeless to much more hopeful if they are tuned into national issues has been incredible.
Yeah.
And then also it's just, most people don't feel like politics or government can ever do anything to improve their lives because they haven't been able to see themselves well represented.
Yeah.
And they haven't been able to see really the benefits that come from that representation. And so to be able to have conversations with folks about what is possible in the future it's powerful.
Yeah.
To see, folks get inspired to vote for the first time even sometimes.
And coming from her speech, she's recognizing, as she said, a strong middle class makes a strong America, and we just don't want to help people get by. We want to help them get ahead.
Yes.
And this is what we want to do in Vermont. So as we look ahead, what are some of the ideas that you were hoping we can tackle next session?
So I want us to build more housing, a lot more housing. I think more housing makes families function better. I think more housing helps our streets because people aren't sleeping in them, and I think
workforce.
And our workforce, and helps new Vermonters come here. And so I think housing is sort of one of the big first steps, and I think we need to pay for that in a way that those who most afford it pay the bulk of the bill. And we got a great bill across the House this year. Hopeful for next year in the Senate if I'm reelected.
Yep.
And then we need to tackle how we organize and how we fund our education system.
Yeah.
We are in the middle of a real turning point in Vermont. I don't know if we have time on the show today to go too deep on it, but I'll tell you, I am eager to go back in and work with folks in Brattleboro and work with folks across the state to really, lower our property taxes and increase the opportunities in our schools.
I see two systems in our culture right now that are really in transition: education and medical care.
Yes.
And that's the other piece. But I agree. There's a process ongoing right now to do that deep dive into how we do education. But I also want to let people know to contact us if you have some ideas around this too, because the process might not be as widespread or as inclusive as we might want. But that's why you can talk to us about these concerns.
And there will be hearings in every region, multiple hearings in every region from the Commission on the Future of Education, though I know most people have no interest in going to a public meeting, though we certainly are the strange type who enjoy them. And so it is really important to get in touch with your legislator and talk about what you want for our education system. As I knock on people's doors and folks talk to me about their concerns about property taxes, I say, okay, so if we're going to do something about this, here are sort of three options that are obvious to me. They're a little bit in tension with each other. They're in tension with how Vermonters have always done things. Like, which of these paths feel good to you?
Yeah.
Because there are no easy decisions ahead of us.
There's not. And what I hope we can do is look at education as itself. How do we best educate our kids? And then how do we pay for it? And make it simple, more simple. And I don't think there are many people who understand how we get to what our property tax bills are now. And that's a big piece.
It is a big piece, and it's very hard to find a tax code or a tax policy where equity and simplicity are both happening.
Yeah.
And so, and I do, frankly, I think the perception of complexity benefits certain people and makes certain people's jobs easier or other things easier. And so I also think we need to sort of unpack our comfort or discomfort with math.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. So we only have a couple of minutes left. I just wanted to briefly talk about our healthcare system too, because there have been plenty of meetings. We have had meetings with Brattleboro Memorial Hospital people. There are a lot of flags out there about what we can do to continue to provide quality, and again, at a cost people can afford. Because right now, a lot of people, even with insurance, are not able to access care.
So I know we're trying to talk about the future here, Mike,
Yeah.
but I think it's really important to name that this, at least for me, was the first year since I joined the legislature 6 years ago that we've really gotten a lot done on healthcare reform, and that feels really exciting to me. And I just want to make sure we talk about it for a brief minute,
Sure,
if that's
go ahead.
okay. So, and when I, again, knock on people's doors, this is what is most exciting to people. So we were able to remove a huge swath of prior authorizations, right? So that healthcare decisions are between a doctor and a patient and not an insurance company. That is incredible, right? We were able to regulate pharmacy benefit managers, which is like an obscure corner of the universe, but means that pharmaceutical costs should go down significantly. And again, holding corporations responsible for their behavior. And then the third thing, which is like sort of deep in the wonky details, but for anyone who lives it, there are a lot of folks who, when they transition from Medicaid to Medicare, wind up paying more. And we changed that, so folks' costs should stay the same. And that's, you know, I've talked to a lot of folks in the last month who were like, you know, experiencing that themselves and thrilled.
I have heard from people too who were, because of Green Mountain Care and how generous we are, our state subsidies, were paying what they could afford. And then they turn 65 and there aren't those state subsidies because it's all federal. And there's sticker shock. So,
and that's like exactly the opposite of how I think most people think it works.
And so we're trying to address that because it's a much bigger problem than I think a lot of people realize. And I don't have any suggestions right now about the future of our medical system, but
I have an idea about the future of our medical system.
But we have to do something, but I'd love to hear.
We do have to do something. So I think there's a real question about our hospitals and how they're organized and how we support them and how we deliver health care and how federally qualified health centers fit into all of that puzzle. But I also just want to name that sort of the House did a significant piece of work in collaboration with the Senate. Not all of it got across the finish line, just that piece about the Medicaid, Medicare got across the finish line. But of steadily sort of shifting the age and income thresholds related to Green Mountain Care so that folks don't have that cliff when they start making more money at work or their kids turn 18. And so like really steadily working on that, the way that we've been able to increase access to childcare and make childcare affordable feels possible to me for the first time since I was elected. And so I think if we're both reelected, that's something that the House would be working on.
Yeah, and I think it's clear this is an area that is in transition, and we'll see what everything looks like when the baby's born.
Yes.
But we need to help out with this, and it's clear this is across the country, but I think it's especially felt in Vermont because we're close to our hospitals. You know, we're close to our medical providers. They're part of our community, and hopefully there can be some federal reforms too. But I'm not holding my breath. But we'll see. Closing remarks. How can people get in touch with you?
Folks can go to emiliekornheiser.org. You'll find links to my email, my social media, some past newsletters, see all the really incredible endorsements I've gotten in this legislative campaign from labor unions across the state, environmental organizations, all really digging in and say, we want Emilie Kornheiser to be reelected. Folks can also talk to me at the polls on August 13th when the primary is coming up in Brattleboro at the American Legion. Or I will probably be at your doorstep fairly soon if I have not been at your doorstep yet. So would love to talk to you there.
And the other reminder right now is early voting has started.
Indeed.
So get out there and vote one way or another. This is one of the benefits of what keeps democracy going. The most basic level is being able to vote. And we're trying to keep making that as easy as we can here in Vermont. Well, thank you, Emilie. It's been a pleasure to work with you and our whole delegation. We really have an amazing delegation here. I think we work better than any other delegation in the state because we meet regularly. We work together during the session. And it's a pleasure to work with you and our group. And hopefully we can continue doing that next year.
Thank you, Mike. It was great being here with you.
Well, thank you. And thank you for watching. Thank you to all the people here at BCTV for continuing this ongoing community service to bring the work in Montpelier closer to you here. Until next time, I'm Mike Mrowicki, and have a great day.